Welcome to Dent Reviews. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Fiio FA1. This is a balanced armature earphone by Fiio. It's around, I think, $80 to $100, somewhere in there. So it's pretty affordable in terms of earphones. Nice earphones. Kind of in line with the Moondrop Starfield, somewhere along that price range. It's a very nice acrylic shell, plastic, whatever you want to call that. I really love translucent plastic. I love when you can see into things. It's pretty cool. The color coding for the red right ear, left blue ear is kind of nice. Nice little wavy pattern on them. They're pretty good looking. I mean, they have a somewhat cheap appearance, and I think that's probably just due to the fact that the plastic looks like plastic. It doesn't look like a nice resin or something like the Moondrop earphones look like, but it's still nice. I really do like it. It's got a semi-custom shape to it where they mold it to your ear, but it's a universal IEM. It's got a standard cable connector here, so you can easily get an aftermarket cable, MMCX type or whatever that's called. Snaps in there good. It does rotate, but it's pretty firm. It doesn't feel like it's coming out. The cable here is pretty hefty in a good way. It's braided underneath a outer sheath, so it's nice and straight and flexible and thick enough that it looks like it's pretty durable. It's got a cord lock here, which is pretty firm but feels nice. Moves around, keeps a good lock on it. It's got a really nice, you know me and my small Y adapter split thingies here. I love that. It's nice and small, compact, no more bigger than it needs to be. Boom. The connector on this is pretty nice. It actually reminds me of like a micro Nutric connector. It seems pretty well built. It's slim enough to fit in probably most cases. It's got a little bit of strain relief like you can see there, but will it hold up? I think so. It feels like a pretty nice cable, honestly. It's pretty well made. It's a decent color. Appearance and everything for the price I think is really nice. The earphones themselves are fairly light. I don't think they're going to break if you drop them. That's the nozzle there. And I just think they did a pretty good job given the constraints of the price. So that is the build and the design. I don't have any of the other accessories. You can check that out online probably, and I'm sure they come with a case or something. Who knows? I don't even know. But all I really care about, as you guys know, is the sound. Are they going to hold up over time? And are they going to sound good and give me enjoyment in the sonic realm? So, how do these sound? These are a pretty interesting earphone. I recommend, first thing I'll say is I recommend wide bore tips. And the reason I say that is without the wide bore tips, the upper treble sounds a little uneven and a little bit subdued. When you open those tips up, it lets a little bit more of that, the upper high treble really breathe a little bit more, and it sounds a little bit more natural, more neutral. So I highly recommend that. These are some Me Electronics now. I think they changed these are old though. I got these a couple years ago, but they're dual flange Me Elect tips, and they work really well. So something like this would work really well, and anything with a similar bore diameter like that. It's pretty wide. So what do they sound like? They sound actually surprisingly neutral for the price. And when I say neutral, I mean they really are pretty overall well balanced with a few caveats. First of all, they're balanced armature, and people have differing opinions of this, but they do sound like a balanced armature driver to me. They have a slightly thin quality to them that the natural timbre is just not there like a dynamic driver. But given the price and the fact that they're balanced armature drivers, they actually sound surprisingly good. They don't really come off as sounding obviously BA or detrimentally thin or plasticky or anything like that. They sound pretty good. Now, the overall character of the sound is a little bit on the neutral with like a bass warm tilt, and what I mean by that is pretty much everything below that 1 kilohertz turning point is kind of boosted and a little bit warm. Not a lot, but the treble on these is actually, I think, pretty impressive, but you don't get to truly enjoy the benefits of it because that overall low end of the earphone, that bottom half of the frequency response, is a little bit elevated, and it kind of adds a little bit of a masking effect. Now, they're not by any means a dull, warm, muddy earphone. They're actually pretty linear, but they have a little bit of a softness to the sound. There's really nothing at all fatiguing. There's nothing offensive, and there's not really much lacking either. There's nothing missing, no obvious super peaks or dips or anything. But that bass shelf just kind of softens the sound and makes it a little bit more warm and maybe, I guess you could say, dark than they would be. Now there's a very slight unevenness in the treble, especially in the kind of that 4 kilohertz all the way up to about 10 kilohertz. It's like kind of wavy, it's a little uneven, and you can hear that if you listen really carefully for it, but it's not at all exaggerated. Nothing sounds out of place or super peaky. In fact, again, all it takes to make these sound noticeably better is a bass shelf EQ, one single EQ point that cuts the bass about 4 decibels or so, pretty much sloping down to about a kilohertz, all the way below that down to 10 hertz. Just kind of slope that off, and they open up, they sound more forward, they sound more open and spacious, and the treble really shines a lot more. So I think that they're kind of hindered by that warmth a little bit, but some people might prefer that sound, because if you get rid of that bass like I prefer, a lot of people find that kind of a forward, sometimes less appealing sound, where I like that personally. I don't like bass warmth. I don't mind a little bit of low bass, but when the mid bass, that, let's say 150 to 400 or 500 hertz, somewhere in there, maybe even 600 hertz, that starts to kind of make the sound a little bit less revealing and a little bit muddier. So nonetheless, I think that these, for the price, are really surprisingly good. They don't do anything wrong. They do everything pretty good. The response is fairly neutral with that warm kind of tilt to it. And the treble extends pretty far, actually. It's not as crisp at the highest register as probably it could be, especially because it's not that it's not crisp as much as I think the region right below that I was talking about, the 4 to 7, 8 kilohertz, 10 kilohertz, whatever, that area kind of overshadows that upper treble, the higher than 10K. So even though the presence is there in the 10K up, it's not really in balance with the lower region, so it sounds maybe a little bit subdued, just a touch. So one thing you could do is EQ down that region I was talking about. But again, now you're starting to do a lot of EQ correction. So just stock, I think they sound very good, fairly linear on the warm side, but they're actually a pretty good technical performer for the price too. They have a lot of stereo width for the price. They have a pretty good level of detail retrieval. Even though they might be a little bit warm and soft, you still can hear a lot of nuances. They're fairly dynamic in their attack. Like a balanced armature is usually pretty fast. The warmth takes away a little bit of the perception of the speed a little bit, but they still have a good attack. They have a good transient response, I guess you could say. The depth isn't as good as it could be because of that warmth. It just takes away a little bit of that open, deep sound to it. But despite that, for the price and the response, they do a good job. I really think that these are really hard hitters at the price range. How do they compare to the Moondrop Starfield? I'm a sucker for dynamic driver earphones, so I'd probably lean towards the Starfield. But for a balanced armature earphone at this price, they compete pretty well. I think the Starfield has a little bit more resolving, a little bit better timbre. But the Starfield has a little bit more obvious bass warmth in the lower mid bass, if that makes sense. And they're more of a harmonish tuning, but these have more overall mid bass and bass, so they kind of give it a softer presentation than the Starfield, where the Starfield has a little bit more energy, I guess you could call it. So for the price, I probably would go with the Starfield, but these are by no means, inferior, drastically inferior. They're very good. I think for the frequency response that they give you, some people might really like the relaxed tone while still getting a lot of details, a lot of retrieval, and just a really good sound. I think there's not really much I can say more. I think they hit a good compromise of neutrality and relaxation of the sound. So I think that if you are looking for something that's not too treble forward, not too fatiguing, but you still want to kind of aim towards a neutralish tone, I think these do pretty good. Don't expect perfect treble. I think something like the Oxygen by Tangima, or however you say that, I think is superior to these, but they're also 3 times the price. But these give you a very good tonal representation of the whole spectrum without any specific region sounding like perfectly linear. they kind of overall have a linear balance. So the tone between mid, treble, and high is balanced. But if you nitpick each section, yeah, you can find a little bit of unevenness in the treble. You can find a little bit of bass warmth. And no, they're not perfect, but they're also not $500, $700. So I think they're attractive. I think they're comfortable. I think they're easily driven by any kind of player. They seem durable and they sound good. In fact, they sound very good for the price. So if you're looking for an entry-level, high-quality earphone, I highly recommend these Fiio FA1s. These are very nice. I'm going to stop it short there. There's not much more I can say. If you have any questions, just leave them below. And as always, thank you guys for watching.